Can I have everyone's attention, please? We'd like to get started. Sorry for the technical delays, but we ran into some technical issues. Just some announcements. As you see, when you walked into the store, we're raffling off tonight a Orvis 8.5-foot 4-weight HLS Adams rod. We still have tickets available. See Ken Kanicki, he's got them over by the fly tying desk, and he'll set you guys and gals up. We also have some t-shirts available, and it's a t-shirt that's benefiting the club. Chuck, can you please? Yeah, thank you. We're taking pre-orders. If you go to the front desk and specify your color, size, and we're going to pre-order them, and then next week, or I'm sorry, the next month's meeting, we'll have them here to pick up. And it's a $25 donation, and it helps fund our stream projects and all our other activities. Yes, we do. And by the way, the picture on the back was drawn by our board member, Bill Jedlico, who drew a beautiful picture of a brook trout. This Saturday, if you guys don't know, we're doing a Stream Explorer project in school at the St. Paul II Church in Lakeview. We've been putting a lot of information out there for folks. Come on down. It's going to be the first Saturday of every month from 9 to 11. And Jim Jowsey, who isn't here tonight, is doing a great job throwing it all together. A few other announcements and we'll get things going here. Right now, we're going to turn this over to Chuck, and he's going to talk about our elections.
Hi. Just briefly on elections, our annual meeting is the March meeting, which will obviously be here again. And at that point in time, we have elections for officers and directors. The officer spots that are open are the treasurer, the vice president, and the secretary. And those are all one-year positions. Anybody can run for that. We take nominations from the floor at each of the next 2 meetings. But anybody before that who would like to run for one of those spots or nominate somebody for that, just let me know and we'll get it together. We've got Dave Unetich as the secretary. Tony Messina is the treasurer. And vice president is Ken Kanicki, who's over with the fly tying. And if you didn't see Dave raise his hand, he's over here on the bench. There are 3 board positions that are to be elected this year, and they would run through 2026 because they go for 3 years. The present people in those positions are Jim Jowsey, Jim Budney. Jim, I know you're here somewhere. There he is. And Don, no, not Don. It was Don, yes. It is Don, I'm sorry. Shouldn't do this from memory. And Don Kwiatkowski, who is up here, okay? And we're always looking for more people for that. The board is responsible for coming up with a slate to present to the group at our February meeting. Like I said, we do take nominations from the floor after that. But if someone's interested in one of those positions, let me know so we can bring it up, at the board meeting in February.
Thanks, Chuck. Speaking of board members, we would like to welcome Dolores Sheehan. She just joined our board within the last month, and we're looking forward to working with her. Also, I don't know if you guys knew Stan Bishop. He was very active in the Red House Brook chapter. He passed away last week, and our condolences go out to him and his family. And also one of our board members, Bill Jedlicka, who's running the meeting remotely, his mom passed away just last week too. So I'd like to have a moment of silence in honor of both of them. Thank you. And I'd like to invite the gentleman from the Springville Rod and Gun Club to talk about the Fly Fishing Festival that's coming up the first week in March. I believe it's March 7th at the Joyland Theater in Springville.
Thanks, Joe. I'll keep it short. So Springville Field and Stream is working with other volunteer groups in Springville to rebuild what we call the trout pond. And I've been visiting with Chuck and everyone. Last 3 years, we've done the Fly Fishing Film Festival down in Springville. It's March 7th this year. It starts at 6 o'clock. It's a family show. It's at the Art Deco Theater. It's a really nice time anyway. We'll have door prizes and we'll also have 50-50 raffle. But more importantly, it raises funds down the road for the maintenance of the trout pond and to connect to those resources anyway. So tonight, I don't know, it looks like the Unabomber. I don't know where they came up with this poster, but that's what it looks like. I left with Adam and the folks here. We've got 25 tickets. They're $15 a piece. Like I said, it opens up at 6 o'clock. It'd be a nice night. Get yourself a pizza at Julie's or something, and just be a nice night for fishing and to talk fishing anyway. Trout Unlimited came last year. I know Joe was here, Jim was there, Chuck, and several other ones were there. So, and then part of it is they give you a Fly Fusion magazine. Here's 4 of them or 5 of them anyway. It's got the information on the front. You can go online to flyfest.com, buy your tickets there, buy them here at Orbis, or several of the businesses in Springville have them also. So take these home with you tonight, and just whoever gets one gets one. So thanks, Joe.
You're welcome. One last housekeeping issue. Greg wasn't kidding when he said the bathrooms are down. So if anyone needs to use it, it's the pool hall across the hallway. Okay, thanks, Adam. And I'd like to introduce our guest speaker tonight. I know a lot of you guys know who he is. He's the New York DEC Region 9 inland trout biologist. And from the turnout, it looks like he's one of the most popular speakers we have. So without further ado, here's the man, the myth, the legend.
Thanks, Joe. No pressure there. Okay. All right. I'd like to also mention Jim Zanette, our principal technician in the Region 9 office, is here as well. He'll be around, talk to people afterwards. First thing I'd say, it's great to actually see everybody. I got to say, the last 2 years, giving presentation, looking at a computer screen has kind of been a drag. One thing, I can't tell whether you guys are still awake or not, so this is a little bit better. So it's really nice to actually be back in person and see people again. So going through the presentation tonight, and it's being recorded. Bill's recording it through here. It took us a little longer to get that all straightened out, but so it'll be on the chapter YouTube channel. Yep. So I'm gonna go through. I want to just follow up a little bit on the stuff that was covered in the November meeting as it relates to Western New York brook trout. Also going to talk about updating the New York State trout stream management plan that went into effect a couple of years ago, and just kind of where we're at with that, what's been done, what still needs to be done. Look at a couple of the stream habitat projects that we were involved in, Trout Unlimited was involved in this summer. Talk about our electrofishing results from this past summer, and a little bit of what we hope to do in 2023, and we'll have time for questions. So anything I baffle you with as we're going through it, we'll have time at the end to go over it as well. All right, so just following up on the November meeting that Chris Murphy did through Zoom. How many people either were here for that or looked at it on the YouTube channel? All right, fair number of you. Without going into a whole lot of it, Chris talked about Trout Power, which is the group that they have up in the Adirondacks, and talked about some of the projects that they were doing. Primarily, they were going out and looking at places that had never been sampled for fish and seeing where brook trout were, but they're also doing some genetics work on what they find. That's work that was done here in Region 9 in the last 10 years or so by DEC staff. Up in the Adirondacks, they get a lot of water up there and not a lot of staff. And so they relied on this volunteer group to be doing some of their work for them. But I want to talk a little bit about kind of how some of that relates to what we're doing. For those of you that saw this, when Chris got into the genetics portion of things with brook trout, he was kind of showing these pretty little graphs there, and without getting into a whole lot of details, basically what we're looking at, this is a way to present genetic results from brook trout populations visually. So basically, when you look at this, individual colors are basically describing unique brook trout genetics in different populations. And in this particular one he was showing here were 6 strains of brook trout that are stocked in the Adirondacks, and over on the right were fish that they sampled up on the Tug Hill. And basically what he was showing here was that you see this dark purple on Tug Hill, it doesn't look like any of those hatchery strains. So basically what they're finding is these are basically heritage or unpolluted with hatchery strain brook trout. So he showed that for some of the stuff they're doing in the Adirondacks. And I just kind of wanted to say that that's not unique to the Adirondacks as far as heritage or unique populations. A couple pictures from fish we took genetics on here in Western New York. Very different looking fish, probably with very different looking genetics. That fish on the left is kind of neat. It's from a stream in Allegheny State Park. We don't see that very often, but we have seen that like a half a dozen times over the years. Those brook trout have no red spots, no blue spots, just some very pale yellow, very silvery. But that's not just like an individual fish. We've seen that over the years occasionally. So a little bit of weird genetics that show that up. But if we look at these, this drawing, this is actually called clustering analysis and genetics. I don't think I get too deep into any of this because I'll admit I don't understand a lot of it. But what we're looking at here in the Erie Niagara watershed, we took brook trout samples on 6 different streams, and these streams were quite far apart from each other. And you see very unique colors on there. And then the gray are our state domestic strain of brook trout. And basically what you want to see there is that 2 things. All those populations are very unique and distinct, all different colors. And also you see very little, if any, gray in there, which means they're not polluted with our domestic hatchery brook trout genetics. So that's a good thing. And I'll explain that a little bit more. But basically, you don't have to go to the Adirondacks to find unique brook trout populations. We have them in the Erie Niagara watershed. And I'm going to mention Crow Creek a little bit later on, where we did a habitat project. And you can see Crow Creek very different from everything else, very unique genetics there. If we go down and look in the Allegheny River watershed, again, there's our hatchery brook trout strain. And we got a lot more samples in here, and some of them are fairly closely, the streams are close geographically. And that does actually show up there. If we look at, say, the upper Allegheny River area right in here, you see a lot of those colors are not that far off, fairly closely related fish. Same in the middle Allegheny River and lower Allegheny River. And that makes sense because those fish are close to each other. They can move through the Allegheny River from one stream to the other, so those genetics are being mixed. But again, you don't see much of any gray on there, so we're not being polluted by the domestic brook trout. Doesn't mean they were never stocked with fish. Just the domestic strain that we use today for the last 40 years isn't showing up. There may be hatchery genetics from 1880 when we started stocking brook trout, but we don't have any fish from back then to test. So anyway, very, very unique populations there. If we look at the Genesee River watershed, basically you see the same thing there. Here's Wiskoy Creek tributaries. Again, fish that could mix with each other from time to time. So those colors are fairly close together. So my point here is basically you don't have to go to the Adirondacks to find unique brook trout populations. They're all over the state. And another thing that Chris talked about a lot was just, he talked about the uniqueness of these fish or the genetic diversity, but he didn't really get into why does that matter. He said that's a good thing. And really, we want to talk a little bit about why it matters. And basically, a more diverse genetic makeup, at least some of those fish in any population or in populations within a species, helps those fish. Basically, if you have a big change, if the water warms up or you have a specific disease come through, that helps to guarantee that at least a few of those fish in that population are going to survive that and keep those fish going. If all the fish have the same genetic makeup and a disease comes along and wipes out the fish that have that genetic makeup, the population's out of luck. But maybe some of those fish, if they're unique or different, will carry on. An example I could think about that would be rainbow trout out west, the Madison River. Some of you remember back in the early 1990s, whirling disease showed up out in the Madison River, and it pretty well wiped out the rainbow trout, but not all of them. A few of those fish were not susceptible to whirling disease, and those fish were survivors, and that's the fish that are in there now. So that's a good example of having diversity in your genetics, so a few of those fish can survive some big catastrophic things and not wipe out the population. Okay, I want to move into where we are with our New York State Trout Stream Management Plan. It went into effect, it was approved in November 2020. Actually, it went into effect April 1st, 2021. And talk a little bit about the progress we've made as far as the plan and a few things that we haven't gotten to yet. And one thing that's very important, and this is something that I did not even appreciate enough when the plan was being developed and first came out, of how much publicly accessible streams, this is geared towards those. Basically, what they called publicly accessible streams, but they really didn't define it very much. But they have defined it now, and it's a lot different than I had in mind, and I think a lot of other people did as well. So I'm going to explain a little about where we are with that. And you're going to see the work is still a work in progress. So the progress will start out on the positive side. The regulations changes that the plan came up with did go into effect April of 2021. Haven't really been too many changes since then. If you go on to the DEC mapping site, we do have a maps up there. The trout streams are up there. At least some of them you're going to see. So I say mostly done, not everything, but a lot of it's done. This past year, took a lot of work, but they got a smartphone app done, New York Hunt Fish, which I guess you can do your report your deer and things like that on it, but it also has all the fishing maps and information in there as well. So people who do everything off their smartphones, that's available now. That we didn't have that when I was talking to you last year. Habitat grants. Well, unfortunately, we aren't doing a whole lot yet, but we do have a program where we give up to $5,000 for materials to Trout Unlimited chapters. And we use one of those this summer here with the Western New York chapter. So we're starting to give out at least small amounts of money for doing some habitat work. Not nearly what we need, but we're starting to do a little bit of that. We're also evaluating a different strain of brown trout in our hatchery system that will hopefully survive more than about 2 days after they're stocked. These are fish that are a hybrid between our domestic strain and wild brown trout. So they can still survive in the hatchery, that's domestic side, but also hopefully survive in the wild a little bit longer. And that's the wild strain of fish that we're taking. And so far we're doing, it's going to be throughout our hatchery system. They were developed at Rome and they're raised at our Catskill hatchery right now. And we're on a 3-year experiment for seeing how they work out, whether they survive better than the straight domestics. And we started that last year in Eastcoy Creek. And we're going to do that again this year with stocking half domestics and half hybrids and see which ones survive better. But so far that's been fairly positive. Got another year of that going. And also, even though in this part of the state we've had year-round trout fishing for a long time, having the year-round catch and release, or having the catch and release season in the fall, winter, was kind of new to some parts of the state. So even though we know it's not having negative impacts, or it shouldn't be, we're still evaluating that, an ongoing project, which we're going to be doing this year and next year as well. So those are some things that we're moving along with in the trout stream plan. This is, if you go onto the DEC website, the DEC info locator, and get into the fishing and trout fishing part, this is a map that's going to come up right there. shows all the trout streams in New York State, right? Maybe not. All right, what's not up there are all the streams that have wild trout that aren't either wild quality or wild premier. It shows the stock streams and the wild quality, wild premier streams. So if you were coming from Illinois and looking at, you might say, well, there's all the trout streams in New York. Not really. I'm told that we're going to be moving towards that, but I think it's going to be a little while. If we kind of zoom into Region 9, again, like I showed you last year, that shows the trout streams in Region 9, but it's really not any. We've got 500 plus streams with wild trout, and they're obviously not on the map. I'm not sure when they're going to show up. They all won't be there. Only the ones that have public access will be. The other thing that's still not on there, and I'm told is going to happen this year, are the angler footpaths. Streams like East Coy and West Coy, we've got a lot of footpaths, and that's the best way to get into the public fishing rights on those and save yourself a 3-mile walk from a bridge. They're not on the maps, but I'm told they're going to come up. So hopefully that part's going to be done before too long. The other thing which we haven't gotten to, which is kind of disappointing to me in the trout plan, we're supposed to be hiring a fluviogeomorphologist, which is a big term for somebody that knows a lot about how streams work and improving fish habitat. And we're supposed to be hiring a position in the Bureau of Fisheries, so we have some of that expertise that we can rely on for doing projects. Some of us know some things about it, but obviously we need somebody whose job is solely doing that. So hopefully that's going to be coming along, but we're not there yet. Okay, I want to talk about a project that I've been doing a lot for the last 3 months, and I'm going to be doing a lot on the next several years or however long I keep working, is verifying access on our stock trout streams. And again, what access is, that definition has changed a little bit. So what's considered right now official public access is one of 3 things. It's either public fishing rights easements, municipal park lands, or DEC lands. And that's what's considered official public access right now. And what we're going to consider unofficial public access, but still publicly accessible waters, will be where landowners have actually given at least verbal permission or signed permission for people to fish.
You pay down Pennsylvania, they paid the landowners for access of $50,000 for half a mile.
Mhm.
They have a program like that?
That's the public fishing rights easement program. Yeah, we pay people for permanent easements on the stream, and we have a fair amount, but far from all of our waters have that. So to go back previous to this coming year, the way we've been stocking up through 2022, basically, if property is already posted, you can't go in there, we're not stocking it. Okay, we've been doing that forever. We've been saying if it's posted, people can't go in there and fish, we're not going to stock fish in it. And if a property is not posted, we've been saying it's okay to stock there. The new policy from our bureau, and my personal opinion is this is not really the way we ought to be going, but it's not up to me. The new policy from now on, just not being posted does not mean we can stock it, or apparently that you can fish it. We need more. So we need to have landowner sign off required. And right now I'm talking about our stock streams. So if we contact a landowner, I'm going to go through the process that we've been working on already. And a landowner does say, yes, it's okay for people to fish there. We're going to have signs up there, basically saying fishing permitted by courtesy of landowner. A few other things like, behave yourself. You can't come here and do other things and stuff like that. But you're going to see signs like that in order to know it's a place you can fish. So the public access verification project we've been working on statewide, as far as places we don't currently have official public access where we're stocking fish, over 17,000 individual parcels of property that will include. Here in Region 9, it's over 1,800. So that's a lot of people we got to contact. In 2022, Yeah, somehow. In 2022, in Region 9, we stocked 240 miles of stream with trout. Currently, we only have 113 miles of official public access, either public fishing rights, municipal parks, or state land. And most of that's on just 4 streams: Cattaraugus, Genesee, Ishaway, and Eastquay Creek. So a lot of that mileage, we don't have official public access. So this project, each region had to pick a county to start working in with this project. We started in November, and we've just had to finalize everything for the 2023 stocking. We started in Erie County, and the basic reason is it had the smallest amount of stocked mileage in the region. And really trying to figure out how this was going to go, and I didn't want to start off with our largest number of streams. So I'm not picking on Erie County. It was just the easiest place to start. And as far as where we are in 2023, so we contacted landowners on 4 of the 6 stock streams in Erie County. We didn't need to do anything on Cayuga Creek and on Ellicott Creek because they're both in county parks. So it wasn't any private land. So we had to do that on East Branch Cazenovia, the lower part, or Cattaraugus Creek, where it's the boundary between Erie and Cattaraugus County. East Branch Cazenovia, Little Buffalo, and 18 Mile Creek. So there were a total of 269 private parcels on those 4 streams. We sent out 82 letters. Those were basically at bridges, places like that. We didn't do it off in the middle of nowhere because even if somebody said yes, you couldn't get fish in there and people couldn't get there from the road. So basically we started working at bridges or other access points and worked our way out from there. It's kind of like doing a jigsaw puzzle. So of those 82 letters, 29 people wrote back that they were interested. And so far, 25 of those people have given permission. 19 people said, no, I don't want fishermen there. And then the remainder, 35% didn't respond. And our bureau is saying that's considered no. So basically almost 2/3 of the people we sent letters to are no's. A little bit discouraging, but not surprising. I'm actually surprised we got that many people to actually respond at all. We use letters, obviously, rather than phone calls now because everybody's got a cell phone, so you can't figure out a number to use. We were able to save at least some stocking on all 4 of those creeks. We lost a fair amount of water. We were stocking 17.5 miles. We're down to about 5 miles now. And they also have, after the regions were kind of screaming enough about this, they're going to allow us to do what are called roadside access points. So if a property owner at one bridge says yes, but we don't have a long enough section to make it a stocked reach, it has to be at least a mile long, they're allowing us to stock fish at that bridge for that property. And we're sure to tell the fish to stay right in that pool. So, don't swim her up or downstream. Don't ask me to explain it, but it allowed us to still do some stocking where we might not have otherwise because it wouldn't be in a long extended section. Basically what it comes down to is we lost about 700 fish. It really would have been more than that, except for those bridge crossing points that we're able to put in, and those are being stocked fairly heavily. So we did lose some fish stocking. And again, this was about 10% of the stock mileage in the region. So there's still an awful lot to do. Yep.
Is this happening in Region 8 as well?
It's happening in all the DEC regions. Yep. And the project is supposed to be wrapped up in 2025. So the next 2 to 3 years, we're supposed to do all of the counties. It's kind of where we're at. So it's been.
Those miles you lost, are they really lost miles to us, or were we really using those miles?
Those were places that were within that stock section. So you basically put a fish in at this bridge, fish at that bridge, and you consider the distance between those. But now, if we don't have all of those landowners saying yes, we've got to take those pieces out. So that's where we lost a lot of that mileage. That's a good question. Nobody's told us that yet. I will say last year our stockings were done such that all of our streams policies were done at 100%. because usually on brown trout, which is most of the fish we stock in our streams, we can only raise maybe 85 to 90% of what the policies call for in our hatchery system. And so there's usually a shortfall of that. But beginning last year, our streams get 100% of their policies, and then the leftovers go into the stocks, ponds and lakes. So basically, those 700 fish probably be spread in the ponds or lakes that might have gotten shorted before. Right now, this is not a huge number of fish, and I don't know how it's going to come out in the other regions. But once we start getting into the other counties that have a lot more stock mileage, it's going to be a lot more fish. I'll also say this would have been a larger drop, except Cattaraugus Creek, kind of complicated, but one of the factors that goes into our stocking numbers is the fishing pressure. And when I calculated that for Cattaraugus Creek in 2021, and this is the lower portion of Cattaraugus Creek below Elton, I used the standard 100 hours per acre of fishing pressure. And I did not notice I'd done that and should have used what was found in the 2020 angler survey that we did on Cattaraugus that found over 300 hours per acre. So I was able to stock it at a higher rate now. So that got a few more. It actually gets more fish in that section, even though the section's smaller this year. So what's that? Yes, the two stock sections of Cattaraugus Creek, the stocked extended goes from Elton Creek up towards the headwaters. And then there's a section below Elton Creek down towards Hake Road. It's actually a shortened section, only a couple of miles now. It would be west of Arcade, yeah, Yorkshire. Yeah. Okay, so saying all this, this is Trout Unlimited, really more of a wild trout thing, but I know a lot of us fish for stock trout too, so I'm going to tell you where we're at with that, because this is not something that's been very well broadcast at all by our Bureau of where we're going, and it really, it was kind of in the trout stream plan, but it was not front and center in it. So most of us probably didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it. But it is going to make a lot of changes in future years to our stock trout streams. This public access verification project, we're going to lose a lot more stocking areas where people either say, no, I don't want you to be there, or don't tell us anything at all. Where before, if it wasn't posted, we assumed that people would be allowed to fish there.
Do you pay those people in the past?
No.
So just them being nice.
Right, yep. Yeah.
Is there any type of thought down the road, like Pennsylvania does with the trout permit, to gather money from all of us to pay these people so we get access?
Well, I mean, we've talked about having something different than the public fishing rights program, maybe a short-term easement. Those have its advantages, but they have a disadvantage too. A lot of people don't want to sell a fishing rights easement because it's forever. So maybe somebody'd be more happy if it was a 5-year thing. But, and that's good, except in 5 years, you got to go deal with those people all over again. And if you saw the amount of paperwork that our easements take, you would not want to do that every 5 years. You want to get it done once and get the hell away from it and get to something else. Yeah, and as far as a trout stamp, I don't think you're ever going to see that in New York. That's just, it's one of those extra taxes, fees, things like that, that's probably not going to fly with sportsmen. So we are going to lose some access points, some access areas. Also, the use on our stock trout streams is really down from where it was. Our trout stocking policies really are based, they're really not any different as far as the number of trout we're stocking in streams than they were 35 or 40 years ago. But we know that there's maybe a quarter of the number of people that are fishing for stock trout now. Our angler surveys are showing that. There's just much smaller number of people that are out there fishing. And these fish cost more to raise every year. So a larger and larger portion of our budget is going to stocking trout for fewer and fewer people that are fishing for them. So, and we have had to reduce, we've stopped stocking in about 19 streams since 2021, or since 2020, I should say, based on going out and doing angler surveys and finding very, very few people out there.
Well, isn't our licenses, if you do the New York State fishing licenses, isn't that just going up for the last 4 or 5 years?
I don't know if it's going up. It may be fairly level, but the amount of use that's being directed towards stock trout streams is what's been going down. I don't know, Jim, do you remember if license sales are up, down, over?
There was a spike in the first year of COVID and then it came back down.
Yeah.
But it's pretty level.
Mhm.
That's where the Trout stand will come in.
Yeah.
Has there been any surveys done to assess the appetite for trout stand?
I don't know. It's been talked about for all of my career, and it's just a political non-starter. So anything we do with license fees, that all comes through the legislature and the governor's office. So it's not anything we have anything to do with. Yeah. Yep. All right. So lower angler use has eliminated some streams. We've had to combine some. Yeah, Chuck.
Just, are you aware of any place where there has been, in New York, where there has been that kind of additional revenue through a stamp? Because the only one I can think of in my long lifetime was the buyout of the gillnet fishermen on Lake Erie, where the fishermen supported
Mhm.
paying a fee to fish Lake Erie.
Yeah, there was the Lake Erie stamp was,
Specifically by Al Gilmer.
Yeah.
I believe it was so successful that they stopped it after two
Mhm.
and then bought one of the boats that the East owned.
yeah, so the Gillnet buyback program, and we built some access sites and things like that with it. The only other one I know of, we used to have a muskie stamp for Chautauqua Lake. And that went away quite a few years ago for a couple reasons. One is people really weren't keeping them. And the real reason is it used to cost $1. And then somebody, I don't think even in DEC, somebody said, we're only charging $1 for that. We need to charge $5 for it. As soon as we did that, everybody stopped buying them. So then we just said, forget it, just do away with it. So that's the only other one I was aware of. But yeah, that's beyond my pay grade for figuring out how to do trout stamp. All right, so we will be stocking less fish in the future for those reasons above, both public access and the amount of use. And like I said, it's not totally unwarranted because of the amount of angler use on our stock streams has gone down. And we probably do need to bring that more into balance for the number of fish we're putting out there for the amount of people that are using them. So shift gears away from all this, the trout stocking stuff, get on a little bit more habitat stuff and our wild trout stuff, that's frankly a lot more fun for me to deal with. This access verification project is probably pushing me closer and closer to the door right now. So on Wiscoy Creek, Gray Cabin project, you've seen some stuff in your newsletter about it. It was a nice project that we did this summer. Stabilizing 400 feet of stream bank and installed some stream habitat structures or lunker structures that I've talked about here before. How many people are familiar with the Gray Cabin from Wiscoy Creek? Okay, a lot of people know where that is. Basically, this was a cooperative effort. We needed landowner permission because obviously we got to drive through their property to get there. Wyoming County Soil and Water Conservation District, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Western New York TU, and DEC. So any of these projects we do, no single entity does these projects anymore. They're all cooperative efforts, and we need everybody involved. Yes, yep, that's public fishing rights. This project was around 82 grand, I think I was able to come up with. Funding came from Fish and Wildlife Service. I was hoping Tom Hoffman from Fish and Wildlife Service to be able to be here tonight, but he wasn't able to make it. He's just been vital to most of the habitat projects we've done here for the last 10 years in the region. Soil and Water also chipped some money in, Western New York TU and DEC, and then in-kind labor from Trout Unlimited and the agencies. So this is what the site looked like before. A eroded bank and this ag field in here. I've been watching this for a decade now, and every time I'm through there, I say, we really need to do something with this section. And last year we finally said, okay, well, let's get something done. This section has actually eroded about 30 feet into the field in the last 10 years from looking at Google Earth images. So you might not notice it from year to year, but it really has moved quite a bit. And it's eroding a lot of material down the stream. So project was to take care of that bank and install some more habitat.
So the landowner actually bought the property.
Yeah, yeah. And the farmer there, he knew, you know, he's losing land. He doesn't have anything, you know, he didn't have to put anything financially into this, but he's losing farmland. So it was in his interest to do this. This is another look. This downstream bank right here has been falling in every year. It does have some depth down through here. It's about 3 or 4 feet deep, and there were some natural undercuts in there. This is one of our standard electrofishing sites there. And wherever there was a little bit of undercut, we were pulling some nice fish out of there. So he said, let's try to mimic that with those lunker structures. The upstream end of it had a pretty nice pool up here, about 5 feet deep, but there, other than depth, there wasn't really much shelter in there. Nothing for fish to get in and hide under. So we wanted to improve that a little with both rock as well as some lunker structures. So again, the lunker structures, if you haven't seen them, they're pretty basic. They're basically a wooden crib. This is the part that goes back into the bank. This is the part the fish swim into and have a place to hide under there. Basically, we're imitating an undercut bank. So this is what the site looks like. This is kind of neat because the contractor actually had his own drone. At least he did until he splashed it into the creek. But we did get some pretty neat pictures beforehand. So this is that pool section, the upper part up here. This is a bank we're going to line with rock in here, with lots of spaces for fish to hide in. And this section down in here is where the lunker structures, most of them went in. So this is a section you see we've moved the creek over here temporarily, so we're not working in the water and putting all kinds of mud down the creek. But that's what it looked like from overhead. View from down on the ground. This is from the upstream looking down the bypass channel. And when we were done, we filled that all back in, got the creek back in. Here's that upper pool. Another drone shot as we're putting a couple of lunker structures in the tail of the pool to provide some cover. And here you can see how he's laying some of the rock at the toe of the slope in here, left with lots of nooks and crannies in there. From our electrofishing surveys, whenever we see stuff like that, that holds a lot of fish. So just that riprap can be a lot of good habitat as well. So whenever we work with anybody that's installing riprap on a stream now, one of the standard conditions in their permit is to leave those nooks and crannies and spaces as fish habitat, and that does work really well. This is lunker structures being put in at the lower end, line through here. And again, this is going to be about 4 foot depth out in front of here and gets a little shallower up into the riffle. Rebar that's going to help to hold it in place. There's a rebar, and anybody that's worked on our projects before knows that's how you put the rebar in, is one of these rebar drivers, and a lot of muscle, and try not to take your finger off or anything. Well, besides the drone, the contractor had an electric rebar driver. God, I wish I had one of these like 20 years ago, right, Chuck? I mean, the thing does weigh like 5,000 pounds, so to try to get it up on the rebar was not a whole lot of fun. But that's why we had a couple of young guys from Soil and Water Conservation District that could do that. And then once you get it up on the rebar, it just drives it right in, and that's really slick. So that was a nice part of the project to have that. Once the rebar is on there, then you're placing some real heavy stone on the front of this. Again, these are projects that you're not going to do with a bunch of TU volunteers and some crowbars. You really do need that large machinery. And to try to do any kind of project that would have worked on 400 feet of stream bank, you're talking about a month of work by hand, where this guy can do it in a few days with the machinery. So these are very large, heavy rocks. They're going to take the brunt force of the flood flow before it gets up onto the fire up the bank, and also help hold those lunkers down in place. Once you get the rocks on, you put some smaller stone in here to make sure fine material doesn't get sucked down into the lunkers from behind. And then you build the bank out over that, and finally top it with some large stone in there. And that's what the section looked like after you had water put back in there. So you got a lot of depth right in here. That's going to hold a lot of fish. Be a good spot to fish. Looking downstream through that section. And we're going to be coming back this spring. We've already got some willow live stakes put in through the riprap here. We're gonna come back this spring and do a lot of plantings up on the floodplain and up behind here. Because we want to get some tall shade trees growing on there as quick as we can.
Do you have any statistics how much per foot it costs?
I mean, the whole thing was 82,000, but that includes the rock in there. The lunker structures, those things are 8 feet long, and it costs, I think, materials about $110 maybe, most of it's wood to put that in. So we could, my math's not that quick, but we could figure that out. The lunker structures are actually pretty cheap as far as that goes. No, we'd have to go back and compare it to what the old log cribbing structures we put in, that you see all the miles of it on the Wiscoy. See how they would compare, but I do know that that's a lot more labor intensive because I built some of that cribbing. These are a much simpler way to get accomplish the same thing.
How long do you anticipate those lunker structures holding out?
They're going to hold up a long time because they are underwater all the time. So when you put wood underwater, it takes a very long time for it to rot, and they're made out of hemlock, which is very rot resistant. So those are going to outlive all of us.
Yeah.
Yep. And I don't mean to say some of us are kind of old in here, but they're going to be there a long time. Yep. And this project's already had 2 very large floods on it. We had one Veterans Day when we got, I don't know, 2 or 3 inches of rain. We had another one with a big snow melt there. So the water has already been up and over those rocks into the field twice, and everything is held together. We haven't had any damage at all. You can see some of the flood debris up on the top of the rocks here. So it's taken a lot of water already, and everything's holding together really nice. This is what the upper pool looks like. This is where those lunker structures are put in right there. And this pool is a good, it's still at least 5 feet deep. It might be deeper than that now after those high waters. Another look at that upper pool. Lunkers out in there. This is after the first flood, I think, before the second one. I think I got a video when I was up there a week and a half ago after another inch of rain. So it's working nice, pretty much just like we planned. So that's what the stretch looks like. And like I said, we're going to be in there this spring, starting to get some trees on it, and start making it not look quite as industrial. This is about a mile and a half downstream of the village of Pike, right off Eastcoy Road. There's an angler footpath that goes from Eastcoy Road down to the stream right there. Okay, the second project we worked on up in the Tonawanda Creek watershed is the Crow Creek Culvert project. This is a project that you probably heard from time to time because it's been in the planning stages for what seems like about 20 years. It's just taken a long time to put the whole thing together for a whole bunch of complicated reasons, but we finally got it done this year. So it replaced a very undersized culvert. We had a 3-foot culvert there for a stream, and it probably needed to be considerably larger than that. So it was undersized, so it couldn't pass flood flows, and also blocking fish passage because of being steep. I didn't really have a drop out of it, but it was very steep and long. Also added a little bit of fish habitat upstream of the culvert. Once we passed the brook trout up through the culvert, we wanted to make sure they had some homes up above there. Another cooperative project, and this one was really spearheaded by Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper. They wanted to replace a culvert on a brook trout stream. Didn't have a lot of choices in their watersheds that they work in, Tonawanda or Buffalo Creek, but we did choose that one. Had to have cooperative landowners there. Wyoming County DPW, the Highway Department, was actually contracted by Waterkeeper to do the construction, and they did a real good job with it. Soil and water involved, Fish and Wildlife Service, TU, and DEC. So funding for this project mainly from Waterkeeper and Fish and Wildlife Service also, and then in-kind work from Trout Unlimited and the agencies. So here's what it looked like before. This is the outlet of the culvert. The culvert, in addition to being too small, was very misaligned to where the stream was. It was definitely not a straight shot in and out of the culvert. So this is the outlet where the water comes pouring out, and immediately took a 90-degree turn through there. Not great. Not much of a pool there. There were a few fish in it, but not terribly great habitat. And this is upstream of the culvert. Again, it came in here, had to take a 90-degree turn into a small culvert. So whenever you had a flood, the water backed up and dropped out, lots of sediment in here. This was difficult to even wade up through that thing because it was up to your knees in muck. Before we did the culvert replacement, we did electrofishing downstream of the culvert and upstream. Downstream of the culvert, we found a really nice wild brook trout population, both adults and young of the year. Upstream of the culvert, just a 3 or 4 adults and a handful of young of the year. So that culvert was definitely splitting that population apart. And this population above the culvert was much, much smaller than below. So definitely a barrier to fish passage. So this is the culvert being put together in pieces, considerably larger. This puppy was 13 feet by 9 feet, squashed aluminum pipe arch culvert. For reasons I won't get into, it ended up probably a little bigger than it should be. In fact, this is probably going to be the most flood resilient culvert in New York State at this point. If this one washes out, the rest of us are in really big trouble. So that's what the culvert looks like after it's been installed. And also, in order for fish to be able to get up through it, we're going to create a more natural stream bed with cobble and gravel in the bottom of it. Fill in a couple of feet of the culvert with that. And that's what it looks like after you got water going back through it. So obviously it looks pretty small. I got a picture of it the other day when it had some more water in it, but in the, we had a drought year, so it was fairly low. So again, we used some lunker structures in here. These are what we call brookie lunkers. They're a little bit smaller than the ones we use in the Wiscoy because you got a much smaller stream. Those were built by TU members and different agency staff. And we installed them upstream of the culvert. We put 4 in on the first bend. You see these things are a little bit smaller version. And we put 3 more upstream of that, another pool. That's what that upper pool looked like once it's done. And the lower pool. So we got some nice spots in there. We went back and electrofished in August. I should say when we did the electrofishing below the culvert, before the project, we marked those fish, the adult fish. We came back in August, we found several of those fish had already gone up through the culvert. So we know they're passing up through there. Tom Hoffman and his crew did some additional tagging when we were there in August. So we got some more fish to go back and look for this coming year. But we know they're already using it. It's a dead end public road. Yep. So additionally, upstream, we had Riverkeeper had some money left over and said, well, what else can we do? We couldn't go up through these woods with a bunch of machinery and do things. So we were able to take some logs that we could carry up in there and installed a bunch more logs in some of the pools up there to try to get some more woody debris in there. Landowners certainly wouldn't want us to be lopping down their trees. Hear a lot about chop and drop projects for habitat, and this was carry logs habitat type project. So we did a little bit more of that upstream. And this is what it looked like a week and a half ago. Again, same day I took that picture on the Wiscoy. So really humming along. Also additional funding that they had, they were able to get some large trees planted by a contractor. And that was done back in January during a thaw. So got a lot of trees and shrubs in there to start reshading that section. So that project turned out pretty nice too. Any questions on the habitat stuff? Okay. So we did some electrofishing this summer on a number of our streams and talk a little bit about what we found there. We worked on 7 streams. We did 31 sites on those streams. So in Cattaraugus County, we did Elton Creek, McKinstry, Fenton Brook, Lime Lake Outlet. Up in Erie County, Hosmer Brook, and Wyoming County, Flynn Brook and Wiscoy Creek. That's what we worked on this summer. So between those 7 streams, we did 31 sites. The objective here was to be getting population estimates on these wild quality and wild premier regulation streams pretty much right when the regulation went into effect. The other streams that this completes all those streams. We did the other ones in 2021. Talked about that last year. So now we've got population estimates on all these special regulation streams in the region. right at the beginning of the regulations. So we can go back in the future and see, has anything changed? You know, doubt it will on based on those regulations, but we've got some baseline data from that now. So the wild quality streams, the minimum criteria as far as the populations, in order to be in that management category, they need to have at least 300 adult fish per mile or 40 pounds per acre. It doesn't have to be both things, it has to be one or the other. They need to be at least 10-foot average width, and they need to have public access. Now, that's pretty much what it said in the trout plan. Now they've defined public access a little bit differently. That may start to be an issue because some of these streams don't have public fishing rights. They're not posted. And in my mind, when we set this up, not posted means you can go fish there. Apparently that's not the way the Bureau's looking at it now. So we're not tackling those streams right now. We're working on the stock streams, but I have a feeling when that gets done, they're going to start looking at these streams as well. So some of this public access stuff may get complicated down the road. But okay, the first one we'll look at is Flynn Brook. This is a tributary to Upper Cattaraugus Creek. Nice little stream. We shot 4 sites there. Population is made up of mainly brown trout, but there are some brook trout. So BT is what we use for brown trout, and ST or speckled trout, brook trout. And what I did, I put that minimum criteria bars in this first one. So they need to be at least 300 fish per mile. That's what this is on this side. And the graph on this side is the pounds per acre. The biomass needs to be at least 40. You can see on Flynn Brook, we're twice the fish per mile that we need, and we're more than twice the biomass as well. So nice stream there. Again, some nice sized brown trout. Fenton Brook, stream over in western Cattaraugus County. It's also called Mud Creek on a lot of maps, but we call it Fenton Brook because that just sounds like a nicer trout stream than Mud Creek. There's actually a lot of mud creeks in Cattaraugus County, and a number of them are pretty good trout streams, ironically. So Fenton Brook, we shot 3 sites. And if we look at the chart there, you can see, again, it needs to be at least 300. We were at 1,000 fish per mile in there, and the biomass, about 115 pounds per acre. So this is a really nice stream, very rich and fertile. Some nice sized trout. Very good reproduction in this stream as well. 2 of our 3 sites had some of the most outstanding numbers of young of the year trout that I've ever seen. In fact, this one that we were shocking, our upper site right here, we could have stood for about an hour in that spot, I think, and just keep picking up young of the year. They just kept coming and coming. So I think we caught like 800 young of the year in 400 feet of stream, and I doubt we got a third of what was there. Just outstanding reproduction. So that stream's a trout factory. Elton Creek. What's that, Brian?
What does it flow into? Is it a cap?
No, it goes in actually into Conewango Creek.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Brian?
Are these on the locator map, these streams?
Those actually are. Yep. The few that are, yes. Okay, so Elton Creek, we did five sites, and this is down in Yorkshire, Delavan area. So we're talking brown and rainbow trout in this stream, mixed population. And we got about 600 fish per mile, and again, about 115 pounds per acre. Some really nice sized brown trout in here. We got several fish over 20 inches. That rainbow is about 15 inches long, which those of you that fish our inland streams for trout, that's a really nice sized rainbow trout, one of the biggest ones we've ever shot. And I think I was actually attached to this fish when I was fishing in September. I was fishing in the same run we got it out of, came up and took my caddis fly, and it jumped about eyeball high. And I said, that's a rainbow. That's a really big rainbow. As soon as he hit the water, he went back into the bushes and snapped me off. It was one of those, you're like, did that actually happen? So that was a really neat fish. So good population there. McKinstry Creek, trib to Lime Lake Outlet, Cattaraugus County. We shot 2 sites there. Again, about 600 fish per mile and about 90 pounds per acre. So again, plenty of fish there. Hosmer Brook, Southern Erie County, Sardinia. 3 electro fishing sites. Again, a mixed brown and rainbow trout population. just about 600 fish per mile and a little over 80 pounds per acre. So again, twice the biomass that it needs, and some really nice size, very colorful browns. So these pictures are all from the streams that I'm showing there. So those were the wild quality management streams. And we did 2 more of the wild premier streams. So the wild premier has a little bit higher bar set. It needs to be at least 500 adult fish per mile and at least 60 pounds per acre. Streams need to be bigger, average width at least 20 feet, and we have to have at least 3 mile long sections to go. And again, it says abundant public access, whatever that means. Chuck.
Yeah, how do you measure the average width?
Okay, that's a good question, and this is the summertime width, so it's low flow.
It's gonna be narrow and down below.
Yeah, so what we basically do at each of our electrofishing sites, if we do 400 feet, we go in and every 40 feet, so we're getting 10 widths at each of those electrofishing sites to get that average width. And then we have 3, 4, whatever sites. So that's how we get our average width. So yes, it's wider downstream, narrower upstream, but we're getting that average width. So, and it's in the summertime, so it's generally low flow. It's not flood widths in there. Those are just criteria that they put in there to make sure these streams are a little bigger and more fishable. And on the wild quality, they just want to make sure they're not something you can step over, even though we've got a lot of really good streams that you can step over. So those are the criteria for wild premier. Lime Lake Outlet we did. Again, this is down in Delavan, very nice stream. And I put the minimum bars in here again, 500 fish per mile or 60 pounds per acre. We did 4 sites on Lime Lake Outlet, and it's mixed brown and rainbows. Whoops, let me go back. All right, so you can see we're more than double what we needed on the abundance, over 1,000 fish per mile and almost 140 pounds per acre. And some really nice size fish. This one was well over 20. We get a lot of fish, 16, 18 and plus in there. So some really nice trout. It's not, it's not a pristine stream. It runs right along Route 16. You might want to wear your earplugs, but there are a lot of fish there. And Wiskoy Creek was the other one that we did. We did 10 sites on Wiskoy. Now this is one we did in 2021 as well, but we were only able to do 6 sites. Just weren't able to do quite as much. We went back to do Wiskoy this year, and these 10 sites, the same sites that were done in 2006, 9, 12, and 15. And a lot of these sites have been done many, many other times before that as well. But we got a lot of long-term data here. So we did 10 sites, and they're stretched everywhere from down in the village of Wiskoy up through Bliss, kind of spread out through the whole creek. And what you see there is over 900 fish per mile and exactly 100 pounds per acre. So easily within the minimum criteria for wild premier. That's not the numbers of fish that you would have seen in the 1990s into the early 2000s, but it's still a lot of fish and a lot of big fish. A lot of really nice fish there. In fact, I couldn't fit them all on that slide, so I used another slide. When I started shocking Wiskoy Creek in 1991, if we did 10 sites and we got 1 18-inch fish, they're like, hey, this is a good year. We got a lot more fish, but very few big fish. And now every site we do has at least 1 18-inch fish. And some of these fish are from down in below the falls in the village of Wiskoy. That site has a lot of really big fish. So just some beautiful brown trout coming out of there. The numbers are not as high as they used to be, and partly because of that, we're growing some larger trout as well. And I think probably more anglers are releasing those larger fish as well. Chuck.
Jordan, what I wanted to ask is, do you have the poundage records back through all that time? I was wondering if the number of pounds is roughly the same as it was when there were more fish.
That's a good question, and I would say yes. I'd have to go back and look at the data, but I remember maybe 120 pounds per acre some years. But the pounds per acre hasn't changed a lot. So you're right. The biomass is kind of the biomass. It can either be made up of more smaller fish or less bigger fish. You kind of get the same pounds. So yeah, I think that's a good point in there. Yep. Yeah.
You test these sites, what about distribution? I mean, like all in one pool and then you got a mile of nothing or, you know.
Well, yeah, they're going to be using the better habitat,
Right.
and we have to be a little bit careful of where, you know, where we get the fish, because sometimes we'll push those fish away within that site. So those fish are naturally going to go hide in the best cover. So they might have been out in the shallower water, but when we're coming up behind them with electricity, they're going to go hide in the better spots. So it's a little bit hard to say, but yeah, they're not hanging out in the shallow riffles in general.
Right.
They're going to be in the deeper pools. And one of the things that definitely happened on the Wiscoy, you know, I wish we had done a better job of measuring the actual habitat along the entire creek, because those of you who fished it for a long time, you know, it used to be miles and miles of good quality log cribbing habitat that held a lot of fish. And a lot of that has deteriorated and gone away now. So we've lost a lot of that. Some of it's been replaced by natural habitat, down trees and log jams, but not all of it. So I suspect that the amount of quality habitat is not quite what it was. And the type of habitat that's there may not be working as well as it used to. Think about it from this standpoint, that it used to be a 5-foot deep pool. If you're a trout and your only predator is a great blue heron that can't go into that deep of water, you're pretty safe. But if your predators now have become common mergansers and otters, that depth is no problem for them. Now you need more of that thick overhead cover that fish can get into, but the predators can't. So sometimes the habitat that used to be good isn't as good quality safety habitat for the fish as it used to be. I can't quantify all that, but I think that definitely plays a role somewhat into some of the declines that we've seen in the total numbers of fish. Yeah. So overall, for what we found from our electrofishing in 2022 on these sites, all of these sites greatly exceeded the minimum amounts that they needed for qualifying either as wild quality or wild premier. And we've got many dozens of other streams in this region that would meet those qualifications biomass wise. We just don't have the public access to put them in there, or they're too small to qualify. And obviously we can't make the streams any wider. We can try to improve the amount of public fishing rights we have, but that's a slow process. So we have all the streams we can fit into those categories right now under the criteria, but we have more streams that have that kind of quality populations. Overall, the brown trout abundance, some of these sites we've been doing for many years, and we did see a dip, particularly like on Wiscoy Creek between 2006 and say 2012. But since then, the biomass and the number of abundance has stayed pretty level. So we had some decline, but it kind of has leveled out. That seems to be the case on most of these streams. Again, large brown trout found in all these streams. Adult rainbow trout biomass in the Cattaraugus Creek watershed, which is where most of these streams are, is down quite a bit from what it had been in the last 10 to 20 years. It just kind of seems to be across the board. Not sure exactly why, but one of the reasons may be reproduction. Brown trout reproduction seemed to mostly be good. That wasn't the primary thing we were measuring, but we obviously are picking up young of the year as we're doing this. And most of the streams had fairly good numbers in young of the year this year for browns, not many rainbows. And we've seen that for several years now, that our rainbow reproduction hasn't been good. And that may just be because of the timing and intensity of floods in the spring, when those young fish are swimming up out of the reds, had a lot more higher flows. That's my best guess at it. But so brown trout holding their own, rainbow trout abundance down some. And to some extent, the browns may be replacing the rainbow numbers a little bit. As far as 2023 and what we plan to do, since we've already gotten through these wild quality, wild premier streams, one of the things I would like to try to do this year is start getting back to a number of these sites where we've done habitat projects in the past. We've done a lot of sites in the last 30 years in this region. One of the things that's on the TU website now is some stuff that I put together list that I put together, and then Wyoming County Soil and Water made some maps of all the places that we've done habitat projects since 1970 in the region. There's a lot of them. So I would like to go back to some of these sites and do some fish population sampling, see what types of habitat, what's working, where are the fish, where aren't they, and kind of be able to document more of that. So we've got a better idea of what types of habitat that they're utilizing the most that we can do. We certainly know those lunkers work really well. Like I said, riprap works pretty well, but we've done some other things like to evaluate. So hoping to do a number of different sites on different streams where we've done those projects. And as always, we'll be wanting to get volunteers out there to let you see what's there and also help us out. We're going to be continuing doing this statewide assessment of the catch and release season. For us, it involves doing some angler counts in the fall and early winter to see if anybody fishing out there. And then we also have some electrofishing sites to go out and look at the reproduction on the streams and try to tie those things together. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in the coming year on this access verification on the stock streams, as well as continuing to try to get public fishing rights. And particularly want to concentrate on some of our wild trout streams, particularly those wild quality streams where we don't have a lot of now official public access, trying to pick up more. And it's a difficult process because obviously you have to have landowners that are agreeable. Also, the problem we're running into a lot now is if people have mortgages, when you go to try to get the fishing rights, the mortgage holder has to sign off what's called a subordination of mortgage, which used to be a piece of cake. And now a lot of the bank lawyers are saying, no, we're not going to do that. So I've had a number of these projects get all the way to closing and then the bank says no. And we're dead in the water until their mortgage is paid off. So there's a number of things like that make this a slower process, but I'm going to be trying to get more PFR, particularly on some of these better wild trout streams. And we're planning some other habitat projects. Don't know exactly where and what yet, probably on Wiscoy Creek and maybe some other streams this summer. Working with Wyoming County Soil and Water, coming up with some of those projects. And there'll be TU involvement in those, and some of them will have things for people to do by hand, not just machines. This was kind of a neat one, maybe a little bit of why it's good we're still stocking fish. This was in the Olean paper this spring. So basically a 5th grader from Hinsdale caught a nice sized brown trout. I'm saying that's a hatchery fish. Can't see it, it's missing a pectoral fin right there, but it's pretty big. And what really caught my eye was their secret to success. A lot of patience and a lot of Doritos and Cheetos. Now, it doesn't say was that the bait or was that for her, but I thought that was kind of neat. And I guess I'd leave you with saying that from one of my favorite authors and probably a lot of yours, solution to any problem, work, love, money, whatever, is to go fishing, and the worse the problem, the longer the trip should be. I try to live by that motto. Yep. All right. So
You have the information on your fish research findings, is that on your website?
as far as the electrofishing results,
The different streams that you surveyed?
yeah. Yep. So the 2021 stuff is up there right now. I should have the stuff finished up for 2022 before long and get that up on our website. I think the technical briefs, which is kind of a summary that we write up, may already be up there. But I'll be putting something together and I send that to TU and they put it out here on the chapter newsletter. So that'll be available pretty soon from last summer's sampling. Yep.
A couple of questions.
Yep.
First, just so everybody knows, how much does the state pay for public fishing rights, the permanent easement?
Okay, the amounts are based on, each stream has a rating based on the quality of the fishing and the access and things like that. And it's on a per mile basis. It's a one-time payment for a permanent easement. Wiscoy Creek is currently $30,000 a mile if you own both banks. If you only own one bank, because a lot of times the stream is the boundary, then it would be half that.
So it's not small change.
No, it's not.
For some of those.
Yeah,
farmers out
basically the streams we're pursuing this on, it's either 30,000 a mile or 22,500 a mile.
there. The second question is, you already sort of answered it. Are you going to be sending out your reports to everybody that's on your email list?
Yep. Yeah, so I've got an email list of like 150 people that, say we want to come out to help shocking. So it'll be going out to that, and then I'll also be sending it in, and it'll be up on the TU website as well.
Third question, could you comment on the shocking that you did on the Eastcoy, where you were looking at that new stock prom?
Yep. Yeah. So we did extensive electrofishing in June on Eastcoy Creek, where we had stocked half domestic brown trout and half of those hybrids. And we were going back in June, after pretty much most of the fishing was going on, to try to see whether there were more of the hybrid fish than the domestics. We didn't find a huge amount of either one, but there were about twice as many of the hybrids as the domestics, which gives us a pretty good idea they're surviving a little bit better. Not in fabulous numbers, but a little bit better, twice as good basically, which actually, ironically enough, is the goal of that program, is to get twice the survival. So that looks fairly promising. Yep.
The last question.
Yep.
The last question is, there was a little bit of a rumor that you're going to be doing less electroshocking this summer.
You may be doing a little bit less, just because that access verification is going to take a huge amount of time. So yeah, I don't know yet exactly how it's going to shake out. We may end up doing a similar number of sites.
It's the only way I can catch fish.
That's true. Yep. Jeff.
Is one of the reasons that there's more success rate on the hybrids is because they're stocking them at a larger size?
No, actually the hybrids were a little bit smaller. They were smaller this year, and the reason is so the hybrids are made of a domestic female and the wild male. So right up until last year, they had to take the domestic brown trout, and normally in a hatchery, they fool the amount of light that they're getting, mess around with the light, so they actually can take eggs from them in like September instead of normally when they would in November in the wild. But they got the males from the wild, so they actually had to wait till the males were ready in November. So those fish basically lost 2 months of growth over what our straight domestics would. And they raised them at our Catskill hatchery, which actually had pretty cold water last year. So they were actually pretty small. I'm told this year, because the males were also kept in the hatchery and fooled with the light, that those fish should be much closer to the same size now. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things we thought about, was those hybrids were actually smaller than the domestics. So maybe people just kept less of them, but the domestics weren't all that huge either. So I think basically people probably threw most of the yearlings back and just kept the 2-year-olds. So I don't know if that affected our results too much. Yeah. Chuck.
Yeah. Now, what would the wild browns normally?
No, November to December.
Okay. And, to give an example of what Scott's saying, when I get the eggs from Randolph Hatchery to take around from chocolate classroom program, it's usually about the second week of October, and those eggs are already eyed up. And sometimes some of them hatch in the thermos on the way to the school. But that's how much earlier those hatchery fish are going. That's 1.5 to 2 months.
Yeah, that taking the eggs early really is needed to get those fish, those yearling fish, up to a stockable size. I don't know, that sound pretty accurate, Jim? Jim spent some of his life working in a fish hatchery and knows the ins and outs of it. But yeah, basically it's very important to do that. And we weren't able to do that with those hybrids until we started keeping the males in the hatchery. Yeah.
You mentioned during this presentation how you might have only shocked half the fish in a pool,
Mhm.
and then you come up with 900 fish per mile.
Yep.
Is that a lot of guesstimation because you think you're only shocking maybe 1/2 of the fish?
It's actually not. Not a guesstimate.
How do you do it then?
Okay, yep, we do 2 electrofishing runs through the site. So we go through the whole thing and we catch all the fish we can and we put them into tubs. Then we go back and we do that site again, catching all the fish we can. Normally we get, most of the time, say 80 to 90% of the fish on that first run. And then you use statistics, it's linear regression models that tell you, so let's just say we get 100 fish on the first run, 20 fish on the second run. We know we caught 120. Our model will probably tell us there's 123 fish there. You just didn't get 3. Now, sometimes some surveys will go back and do a third run, which makes it even more accurate. But basically, the way we do our surveys, we're able to do 2 a day in our normal work day. If we did 3 runs, we'd only be able to do 1 site a day. So we don't get quite as much precision as we could if we did a third run, but that's the way we come up with it.
You think you might be actually electroshocking over 90% of the fish that are?
Yeah.
Where do you think they can just disappear and run away from you?
Yep.
What you heard originally was your talk about young year.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good, that's very good, Jim. So I'm talking about the adult fish in there. The young of the year, we would need to do 3 or 4 runs to get an accurate estimate of those. So what I do with young of the year is we just report the total number that we caught. So yes, it's the total number we caught is definitely not the estimate of what's actually there. But that's a good distinction. These population estimates that I showed, those are just adults, so yearlings and older. Young of the year, we pick them up, try to get an idea of how many are there, but it's not an actual population estimate.
Just hard to believe I fished half a mile of stream and I went by 400 fish.
Yeah, well, that's why it's really a drag to fish the sections that you shock because you know what's there.
I've done the shocking now for the last 2 years, and it's very humble.
Yeah, it's kind of neat because I've had times where people call me up on the phone and say, "There's no fish in such and such a creek." I'm like, yeah, well, there is. And by the way, we're going to be out there sampling it next week. You want to come out? And they do. And sometimes they don't even stay for the second run because after the first run, they're like, oh, okay. And that's actually one of the highlights of my year is when that happens. I don't say I told you so, but it's just kind of like, you don't have to say anything else because they see it. So that's kind of neat.
Well, you've been there too.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Challenging projects about water quality for ag runoff and industrial.
Oh, boy, we don't have that long. He's asked is basically a question, the water quality challenges from runoff and all different things. It's big. We don't live in a pristine region here. We've got a lot of farms. Wyoming County is the largest farming county in the state, as well as some of our other streams around Arcade. They're kind of suburban trout streams. We're very lucky from the standpoint that a number of these streams have very good groundwater spring inputs that keep them cold, but sometimes they're even over fertile with stuff running off. And then when you look at all the other stuff that runs off from people's lawns and yards to farm fields, there's got to be impacts out there. We don't know what they all are. I'm not going to tell you we do. Some of those impacts, we do look at water quality from the standpoint of sensitive aquatic insects and aquatic life. Our Division of Water does sampling, and they go and look for specific insects that are very intolerant to pollution. And that's the way they kind of judge the quality of the water. They're not looking at like total abundance, because I always hear people say, well, this hatch isn't as good as it used to be. I can't say one way or another because we never go out and sample the abundance of those insects. And I'm sure it varies greatly. But the actual quality of the water, as far as things that can live in it that are very sensitive to pollution, most of the streams, most of our trout streams come back as unimpacted or a very low amount of impact. You know, now there's a lot of things that they're not looking for. So I can't say that there aren't impacts. There's got to be some. I think we just don't know enough to know what they all are. And they're changing constantly. there's pesticides and things that are used that who knows what they've done. They just haven't been around long enough to really have long-term studies of the impacts of them. So yeah, we could go on a long time about that, but it's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, of the 100,000 solar panels that are out there that they spray out and weed killer and everything else, what kind of impact is that gonna have?
It potentially could have some, yeah, again,
For 20 years, that land is being leased out.
yeah. No, there's, like I said, there's a lot of stuff that's used all over the place for a lot of things that we don't know the total impacts of them. And
DEC control as far as how much they can put out there.
it depends on what it is, whether it's a regulated thing that they're spraying. There's certain things that you do need to have permits for. And then you have to be licensed applicators, I think, for some things. So there are laws out there to try to rein in some of that and not overuse it and things like that. Same thing with fertilizer on farms. There's certainly there's regulations in effect to try to make sure that they're not over fertilizing when you get an extra runoff. There's a lot of programs now, like if you go into Wyoming County, you used to have all the farms and they would have to spread manure every day. So they would be spreading on snow and then you have rain runoff. And a lot of those farms now have huge manure lagoons. So they can wait to spread till the springtime when they can plow it right in. There's probably improvements there. And that's all good until something goes wrong with one of those 2 million gallon manure lagoons. Luckily, we haven't had that to any great extent, but they're all kind of ticking time bombs out there. So, you improve some things one way and you have some other risks other ways. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you very much. Very good questions. Appreciate your time.
Thanks. Just a few quick messages before we raffle off the rod. I've seen some guys here from the Fly Fishing International Club. I know this Saturday they're going to be at Cabela's with the table. They're doing a little informational and recruitment event. So if you guys are interested in the Fly Fishing International folks, go there. On February 16th to the 20th, the Niagara Fishing Show is happening in Niagara Falls, and they have a real strong emphasis this year on fly fishing. So I think it'll be a good event. We're going to be there. They're going to have a social Friday night craft beer. They were going to charge to get in. It's free to anyone that buys admission to the show. So I think that'd be a good get together for the community. And just looking forward on the upcoming speakers. Next month, Orvis's own Adam Slavinsky is going to be doing the talk on Atlantic salmon and fishing the Gaspé Peninsula. And then Scott's coming back in March to talk about the North Central or Northern PA fishing. And with that, do you have anything else?
I have 4 tickets. I'll just be over at this.
Okay, all right. And let's raffle off the rod, Ken. He's gonna pick it.
I don't know.
Was that young man over there?
Yeah,
Come on up. Mike Zobrek. Not here.
Not here.
All right.
We'll get a hold of them. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. And like I said, we have some shirts. If you guys are interested on the way out, you want to order any up. Thank you for showing up tonight.